Hey everyone, today I'm going to introduce you guys to Teresha Shindle Beck. We met through LinkedIn, but we hit it off because we have a couple of things in common. She did landmarks, so we had a lot of things common, but mainly she has a great story from where she came and how successful she became very young age. And now she kind of coaches people how to be successful. Coaches actually helps people grow, which we'll get into that part later and how she does that. So yeah, people can reach out to her in that. And also, she has a podcast. We'll also get into that, what that topic is. That way, people who want to be on our podcast or maybe fit to that can reach out to her. All right. With that being said, Teresa, let's dive into it. Let's kind of share your background from essentially, I guess, a little bit of your childhood to the success you became. And maybe we'll dive into a little bit of landmark and then we'll go into the business world, like we talked about.
Yeah. So I think previously, like I had mentioned, my background was, um, a tough upbringing, right? I was the kid that, came from addicts on both sides, grew up in a trailer, single mom, and, basically super poor. And I really had, in my opinion, I had not one person, that I would look up to or as a mentor, or anybody I would aspire to be, right? And then my childhood was quite crazy in the sense that from about the ages of 11 to 17, I was sexually abused, and my mom had actually promoted it. And so, I also then got pregnant at 15, had my daughter at 16. And so my childhood was one, that had many struggles, many challenges. Um, but it also played a factor, which we'll talk about in the success of my business, right? Because you hear that a lot when people go through such adversity that, they shine from that. That is, a big driving factor of getting out. For me, I wanted to change my generation when I grew up, right? I didn't want to be like any family member. I wanted to get out and become something more. And what that was, I don't know what that was internally, but I definitely had the drive at a very young age to become completely opposite of what I grew up in. But my childhood was rough.
Mhm.
There's abuse, and like I said, I mean emotional abuse, physical abuse, and then my sexual abuse in my early years.
Got you. Now, we'll get into the part that pivoted, but kind of share, age of 20 something that you created this hugely successful business. Was that before we talked about Landmark? Was that before or after Landmark?
Yeah, so kind of it's interesting. So I had this drive, and again, I don't, I'm pretty spiritual. So there I had a drive
Mhm.
somehow to get out.
Mhm.
And I had also a daughter at 16 to protect her, right? So that was probably my purpose and my why.
Mhm.
And so when I moved out when I was 18, like I graduated high school, which was rare at that, back in, I'm in my late 40s. So for
Mhm.
me to graduate, it was like statistically low percent to graduate from high school. And my thing was to get out and protect my daughter, get a job,
Mhm.
right? And I didn't go to college because I didn't have any money. I had nobody in my family go to college. So for me, I didn't even know how to really go that path.
Mhm.
Um, but I started a job
Mhm.
through a temp service when I was 18, just so I could get an income through, like, again, it was like one of those temp services, and they, put you in a job. And so for about, I would say, I don't know, I was thinking 18 to 20,
Mhm.
I got a job working in a warehouse packing boxes.
Mhm.
And I would say, I know this sounds funny, but like I excelled, right? You talk about like I did it well.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds crazy, but it was a fulfillment center,
Mhm.
and they packed boxes, and they had, top accounts like United Healthcare, Players Industries, Cynics Landed Lakes, and they had these big accounts that would have like corporate apparel, with like logos with their name on it and pens and the trinkets, right, for their actual companies that they would give to customers to promote their company.
Mhm.
And during that time, I got an opportunity where somebody recognized, like, wow, like you do a really good job in the position I was in the warehouse.
Mhm.
And there was an opportunity to work in the office and um, to take on a full-time position with typing. And again, I don't have a background in anything, but
Mhm.
somehow I was able to pick it up super fast. And it was supposed to be a full-time job. And when I got up there, it became kind of part-time for me because I excelled at it. So this 8-hour job I could do in 4.
Mhm.
And so that is kind of the start of, for me, was like my success of the career of people around me. I found mentors, right? That basically helped me. And I stress this a lot in my podcast too, that mentors are, you think of college and relationships, right? They're all important, but mentors and relationships to me are why I got to where I got.
Mhm.
And it was finding those people to help me excel in whatever I was doing, whether it's the podcast now or in the aesthetic space or the apparel industry. I would find those people that did it well and then ask for help and learn what they, or let them teach me, right, if they would, so that I could continue on. But, um, so I excelled. I get with this top salesperson working in the office of this after this warehouse experience. I get an opportunity to work with the top salesperson at the same company.
Mhm.
And that is where we started our own company when I was about 22. The company was getting sold by a private company, and I think there was about 4 salespeople that decided that they didn't want to continue on with the new group, so they left. And my salesman at the time was like, here again, I'm 22, and he was like 10 years older than I was, and he was a mentor of mine, and he was like, come with me. And I'm scared. I'm a single mom making, let's call it $20,000 a year. I don't know, but I had health benefits. That was way more than what I came from. And
Wow.
so for me to leave that was like, are you sure it's going to be okay? Because I'm comfortable here. Like it pays my bills and it provides for my daughter. And again, for me, it was way more than what I had.
Mhm.
And, he just assured me, like, you're super smart. I'm going to teach you everything I know and let's do this. And so 3 of the sales people went and we rented space together, and each of them took their own person with them. Right. And so my salesman had taken me and he said, let's partner, let's create this company. And that's where I learned everything because he didn't just take me in as an employee, he went as a partner.
Mhm.
And so I, at that point, got to know like how to get incorporated and how to really, from the ground up of a business to build the foundation operationally
Mhm.
and sales and do every single part of the company, right, to build it. And so when I was 22, basically our first year, we did $2 million, dollars, like on a 28% margin, with
Mhm.
just 2 of us. And
Right.
so this is a girl who came from the $20,000,
Mhm.
to a huge success story within like a year. And a lot of it was, I'm thankful for him because he had connections. He was 10 years older. But I also helped fundamentally put everything together. I mean, he was that forefront, and then he would bring me everywhere
Mhm.
and teach me how to do every single thing. And he made me super uncomfortable, doing sales presentations when I was like, being sexually abused. And I say this to people, it's like when you come from that, yes, I was motivated um, to have more than what I had, but
Mhm.
you are super shy. You
Mhm.
don't want to be seen. You don't want to be seen. That's a very uncomfortable thing because you're self-protecting. You're
Mhm.
very insecure. And you lack a lot of confidence, but this guy just saw something in me,
Mhm.
and I would say made me do everything I didn't want to do. And
Mhm.
then as I would step into that, the presentation in front of 500 people, all of a sudden it was like, he would build me up to say, you got this, even though inside I'd be like, absolutely not.
Mhm.
And I would do it. And as I would do it, it was all of a sudden like, okay, like people don't really care. Just know your knowledge is power.
Mhm.
Go up there. They don't know what's going on the inside. So I was super good at going on stage
Mhm.
and looking like I had it all together when inside I probably was falling apart.
Mhm.
Um, but the Landmark Forum, so this guy was older than I was, and he knew about my sexual abuse,
Mhm.
and that was part of it. But the Landmark Forum didn't actually come until when I was about 25. So how it kind of transpires is, so I'm building this company
Mhm.
at 22, and when I was about 20, I think 24, 25, I kind of was at a spot where in my heart, I was like, if you, and I believe this to this day, if you are passionate about what you want to do, you
Mhm.
will succeed at it because your heart's driving it,
Mhm.
right? And so I would wake up every day and I wasn't excited, although I made really great money. I had a great partnership. I didn't wake up every day being like, oh my God, this is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to do. It was a hard good, a soft good, right? It wasn't making impact.
Mhm.
And I remember going to my partner, Todd, and saying, like, I can't see myself doing this forever.
Mhm.
Like, it's great. And I think he was shocked because it was the money. He was like, I mean, I had a great, like, it was the opportunity in itself. Most people would die to have. Like, it's a great opportunity. But I was like, I could do so much more if my heart's into it,
Mhm.
you know? And so we made an agreement and he bought me out when I was like 24, 25.
Mhm.
And then because I had worked since I was like 15, being a single mom, I took a couple years off
Mhm.
as I financially could. And I traveled. I hadn't really traveled a lot, hung out with, I was at that age, hung out with my friends, kind of lived a little bit because I didn't have the childhood.
Mhm.
And, during that time, because I didn't have college, it was like I ended up going back into the apparel industry
Mhm.
because that's what I had known. I started my own company at this point.
Mhm.
And during that time is where the Landmark Forum comes in, one of the opportunities. So I built my own company and now I have major accounts too, as well. And here's the thing, I didn't love it, but I knew how to do it and it provided an income.
Mhm.
So I fell back into that, right? And so during that time, the connections I had, one of the guys owned a company, a trucking company in Minnesota, a very successful trucking company. And when I was doing work for him, he owned the World Softball League.
Mhm.
And I was doing all of his apparel, and he was the one that went through Landmark for him, because of his own childhood trauma. And he was again older as well, like 10 years older.
Mhm.
And I told him my story about being sexually abused. So I was always open about the abuse, not necessarily in details,
Mhm.
but I didn't hide it. I just didn't, share details.
Mhm.
And he, said to me, at some point, you're going to need to forgive your mom. And I had went to counseling earlier in my 20s, and I remember the counselor saying, like, statistically you turned out you should be on drugs and four children, and statistically you've already beaten the odds. You started a company at 22, and so I always kind of thought I was healed,
Mhm.
to be honest, not knowing what healing really is.
Mhm.
And I didn't wake up thinking about the abuse every day. So in my mind, and I wasn't angry. I just kind of felt like it was what it was, and I just had to go on with my life.
Mhm.
And he's like, sometimes you don't see the effects until later in life of the real healing process. And it does, it's like he described it really well, and I don't remember exactly, but he's like, when you suppress something, you're gonna pay the price at some point. And I
Yep.
was like, okay. And so I looked up to him as a mentor as well, though, I did business with him, he became a dear friend. And so he was the one that mentioned the Landmark Forum, which was the weekend retreat. And
Mhm.
that, like I had mentioned before, was for me a pivotal moment because here I started my own company on my own, which I was doing very, very well. And the Landmark Forum, the weekend, was all about forgiveness.
Mhm.
And I thought I had already forgiven my mom because I wasn't carrying it. But after taking the class, it was a weekend thing where, you know about it too. It's powerful. It's super powerful because it makes you sit still
Mhm.
for a weekend and really have deep self-reflection and self-awareness and perspective. And I got to write a letter. You didn't need to send it to whomever you needed to forgive. And the power of forgiveness and the forgiveness in my 20s is why I am where I am today,
Mhm.
is because of that. Because people who do not forgive ultimately pay for that, not the person that wronged them. It's the you by not forgiving them. You are the one that hangs on. They go on with their life. They're not even thinking about it. You pay for that. And, that was the turning factor. I met my mom, who I mentioned promoted the abuse during
Mhm.
my childhood. And I just sat with her at a restaurant, just like the landmark form. You can either burn it, you
Mhm.
can mail it, or you could read it to the person. And I chose to read it to my mom. And my mom, didn't care. She just kind of I read the letter to her, and her response is like, that's life. And she was still with the guy. And so
Mhm.
she just didn't really care. But I remember walking out of that restaurant, again, I'm 25, 26. I remember thinking, the letter wasn't about her. It was about me. That the whole landmark forum was not about this other person. It was about yourself. And that was a time where I remember walking out and I'm like, I'm never looking back. And I did what I needed to do. And that's her loss. And I get to go enjoy my life and I'm free.
Mhm.
That is how I felt the landmark forum for me was impactful. But that was when I was 25.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So going to that, right? So all, sharing, we talked about this, and that's, you're exactly right about how, I mean, not just landmark firm, but anything in life is not about other person, it's about us.
Mhm.
What we hold back, and the whole thing, the landmark, for people who haven't been to, one of the things it teaches or really shows people is there's things we know and things we don't know, but most of our life is being run by that what we don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
That's the vicious cycle we run into because we're thinking like, oh, why are we doing this? Why are we not? I want to do this, but why do I still do this? That's because we have a show running behind us we don't know about. And that's what Landmark helps, which has been, I've shared this with Teresa, but for other people, like it has changed the life of my kids because they went through that because I went through that, even my ex. And it's for those who haven't looked at it, that, apart from Teresa's story, I would highly recommend if anybody still has those things that they think that they're under control. But, anyway, let's get into the business, story. Now, fast forward now. No, let's get into a little bit of the podcast. What do you do the podcast about? And who do you talk to and who do you cater to, I guess?
Yeah, so my podcast, became it's kind of funny you think about transitions in life. I
Mhm.
think I had briefly mentioned so I went through so I own now, which we can kind of backtrack, but I own a consulting company.
Mhm.
And when I was going through my divorce, I went through a divorce in the last, 5 years. And when I went through that, I felt like I went through kind of like an identity crisis,
Mhm.
is what I would say to you of like, who in the hell am I? And and what's weird is I would have told you my whole life, I could tell you my industry is like the apparel, I've been in the aesthetic space, I've been very successful in all those elements. But I felt like I didn't know who I was, even though I had a history of who I was,
Mhm.
which is interesting. So I remember going through my divorce and sitting there, and I had taken some time off during my divorce and kind of sat with myself of like, how do I, or what do I want to do where I'm waking up? Kind of going back to my 20s of like, what is my calling? Like, what is my purpose? Like, I had big teams, which we can talk about, but, I was an executive at a company. I had like 1,000 women working for me. And so I always did like motivational speaking and grew a sales and operations team in the aesthetic space. But I was like, what am I supposed to do now? I owned a consulting company doing small businesses and stuff, which we'll talk about. But I also felt like, again, it goes back to how am I making an impact, like my purpose, like what is my purpose in life? And something that gets me jumping out of bed every day and really impacting people in the way that I felt like my heart was wanting me to.
Mhm.
And my podcast is called Your Chapters, Your Story. It came out to be
Mhm.
we all have multiple chapters in our life and we have one story.
Mhm.
And so it really was about initially I thought transformation. Like we all go through a transformation, like when we're going through divorce, and it's like, what does my new life look like over here? And so I'm navigating, children, that looks differently, co-parenting, all these different things, job, pickup. Your whole life has changed. So
Mhm.
it's like, what is it like? how can I help people, men and women, through transition?
Mhm.
But again, it went back to it didn't sit with me completely. Like I knew I could help somebody with that, but it was like I felt like I needed to go deeper than the transformation. And again, I love doing motivational speaking, but again, everyone has a calling. Mine is definitely leadership
Mhm.
and getting someone to their absolute full potential. And I'm really good at taking people in a negative headspace and getting your head, the negative thoughts
Mhm.
out, and believing and hoping and aspiring to your dreams, right? I'm good at that. But I was like, how do we get there when all of us wear so many masks in our life?
Mhm.
Most of us are super far from being authentic,
Mhm.
right? Most of us avoid conflict in our relationships.
Mhm.
Most of us carry some form of pain and secrets that we're not talking about. So, how does someone get to their full potential
Mhm.
with all of that? And what I realized is I had to break through the block,
Mhm.
like the pain or a situation where they feel like they're at a point in their life of not getting to that full potential. And for me, I went back to most of us need to go back to our childhood
Mhm.
because that's where it starts, right? And so for me, it was like I went back to my hometown
Mhm.
and I went to where it all happened.
Mhm.
And I sat in it because a lot of times when you go through pain, you block out your good memories because of your bad. And so you don't remember anything.
Mhm.
And so I went back there and kind of started peeling away. And through that kind of discovery, counseling and my own coaching stuff that I had with people as well, I realized like people need relatable content to
Mhm.
feel like they're not alone. It's so lonely. Most of us are, when we're going through stuff, we feel really alone. Even though we know somebody might have similar,
Mhm.
story, you still feel isolated until you find somebody that you can really connect with, right? Emotionally, where somebody can go, God, they get me. I'm not so alone. Like they get me. They overcame that. They were able to build a badass business. They didn't let that get in the way. And so for me, I decided when I started my podcast that why not talk about my sexual abuse and become so vulnerable to people in a more vulnerable, not surface level, but like the details of it. And so that's kind of how my podcast started I was actually a guest on a podcast before I actually launched mine. And it got like 500,000 views. And a lot of them were people asking about like, how did the sexual abuse started? Like, where's your mom? Where's the baby? And then all these people were message I have a website and it was like people were DMing me and saying like I was sexually abused. I've never told anyone. And they were like in their 50s and 60s. They'd never even told their spouse. And so I was like, wow, like all these people, have so much potential in life and they're being held back. And, when you're really lonely, and I don't know your complete walks of life, but a lot of us, like, you could be in a room with 1,000 people and feel very alone
Mhm.
even though there's good things happening. Like it's just you feel so alone because you're carrying something. And until you kind of release that and break through that and start peeling away your mask to get to that authentic self, you can't get to your full potential. It's just not going to happen because you're hiding behind things. And so that's where the podcast kind of came out was trying to get people to have relatable content through storytelling, whether it's through guest, my own content, and then just inspiring people. And like you kind of said it at the beginning of this, it's like if we help one person, for me, that was my thing.
Mhm.
But now I'm on a mission to be a badass person and help way more than the one because I feel like I know the impact people can make. And my tagline I use all the time is like, I'm on a mission to be the voice for the voiceless.
Mhm.
Because when you are sexually abused, remember in my 20s, you don't want to talk.
Mhm.
Like the fact that I'm talking, that is not typical for somebody who's been sexually abused because we have a lot of shame and a lot of, again, we don't want to be pretty, we want to be hidden, we don't want to be seen, we want to protect ourselves. So that's my podcast is really sharing relatable content and inspiring people motivation. So it starts with my dark story, my own personal one, but it's to show my own vulnerability
Mhm.
and my own darkness and my own pain to
Mhm.
know that, yeah, on the outside, it looks good. I've been an executive. I built a company in my 20s, but I didn't get there overnight, and I didn't get there in when I was healed. I got there in massive pain. So all those things I was, going through from a business standpoint, that was also when I was living in pain of a situation,
Mhm.
that drove that.
Awesome. I mean, there are so many points to make. There are a couple of quick things. One of the things is about the mask. And this is also taught, kind of good, the landmarks goes to that. There are several things because I've done more than you. So I kind of, remember more stuff, I guess. But one of the things is, the saying is, I'm not who you think you are. I'm who you think I am,
Yeah,
kind of like you're reflecting exactly who you
yeah.
think I am. It's not like, well, I'm not who I think I am. It's like, I am who I think you are. And then it goes back and forth. It gets convoluted.
Yeah, it's
That
true
get
though.
lost in it, right? So, no, that's a great point. And I don't want to say the name who it is, but personal relationship, sexual, someone who went through the sexual abuse that obviously affected the relationships. And I've met several, I think we talked about this, several people. It's much more, I guess, like the stats say it's 25% or something like that. It's very, it's disturbing. Like many people, it's hidden, right? Um, that itself, obviously, is like you're talking about. It's a lot of people are silent and many people don't even know sometimes, seems like, right? It comes out later and sometimes it's fuzzy. They don't know if it's true or not. So anyway, well, I'll be posting her, podcast link and I'll go listen to her on that end. Now we'll pivot to, because I feel like I have several questions on that, but we'll leave it alone now. We'll pivot into the business. So let's
Yeah.
get into the business side. Now you're coaching people. I know we talked about it. You kind of helped several businesses grow multiple hundred persons, right? Can I
Mhm.
give I guess your criteria? Because I know you said fashion industry. I know we talked about things, but I don't want to, say what you told me. Rather, you put it out there. So what do you concentrate on? Growing businesses and what type of people should connect with you, essentially, or how you can help them, I guess.
Yeah, so for me, my 20s was all the apparel, whether it was starting my company with Todd and then starting my own. So it was the, apparel industry doing, again, the promotional items with company logos on it that they would promote to their customers. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, I got into the aesthetic space,
Mhm.
which does the Botox, the hair removal, really that med spa
Right.
uh, space. And, I started at a company because I could, because I had money put away, right? I was able to kind of start from the bottom of that company
Mhm.
as a provider. And then I worked up to a senior VP of sales and operations. It was a $100 million company. And they had 150 locations nationally that I oversaw with a team of 1,000.
Mhm.
And so I did that for 9 years, working my way up kind of every couple of years in that space. And then the company ends up, some of them actually ended up going bankrupt. Some of them sold off. They were privately owned um, by private equity. And, that was also part of my highlight of my career too. I think I'd mentioned is when you surround yourself with mentors, my CEO was, I went through six CEOs in 6 years at that company. And I think I talked about this with you. That is a strength on its own. I don't know how I made it
Mhm.
because everybody brings in their team. And so I was able to make it, but my last one is still a dear friend. The CEO is still a dear friend of mine, very successful CEO, and he became my mentor. And when the company kind of sold off, I stayed on helping because I was part of the board to try to sell the company as well,
Mhm.
which that was kind of what I was mentioning. The opportunity was great because to basically try to sell a company for private equity is a big deal.
Mhm.
And that experience was like for me incredible because the got to see the back end of private equity and how they get to put together all those decks to sell the company. And then I kind of go on after that. I consult for them because
Mhm.
as the company winds down, they hired me back as a consultant to help wind it down and sell off some of the clinics and the equipment and all of that. And during that time, I ended up, I've helped startups. Like I did so I opened my own consulting company because my ex-husband, he is a chiropractor. And so we built a MD-DC model, which is medical doctors with chiros, because chiros actually can't make a lot of money. It's unfortunate. They go to school just like a doctor. They don't make a lot of money. But if you have an MD-DC model, you can bill code different things to from an insurance standpoint, right? If the doctor's there. So we grew in North Texas a bunch of practices there that he still has. They're still open. They do real well.
Mhm.
And so I helped him. I had an opportunity to kind of help him because I was like transitioning. So I helped him kind of continue to grow those. And during that time, I was like, I didn't want to go back into the corporate world because I had been I mean, the corporate world is the grind. I mean, you are constantly on. I traveled all the time. I needed a vacation. I was like, I had done it for so long at this point. So I just started my own, and I basically got opportunities through LinkedIn, which is funny, where people started contacting me once I put, business consultant specifically in the medical space initially is kind of where I started. And then so I did a startup, like Epi Medical, which was like an Amazon for aesthetics, helped him grow that. And then I did a lot of med spas because a lot of them they're individually owned by doctors. Most doctors, business is not their medicine is their expertise. They're not business. So I could go in and because I was sales and operations, which it's hard. Most people are one or the other.
Right.
Or either sales or ops. And I am super well-rounded. So I can go in and whether it's, changing the whole operations or whether it's just changing the sales team, the people selling it, I can go in and sell, like I can do all of that within those companies. So that was easy to go into, whether it's a functional doctor, the chiro office, the med spa world is kind of what I had been doing since 2014.
Mhm.
Uh, so I've owned it and all of my business has been referral based. I've never really had to promote it. I built a website last year, but it was really because I started my podcast. So
Mhm.
I was like, why I'm doing my podcast, I might as well say I do business consulting. And, but yeah, so that's kind of been where I've been recently. I think I had mentioned to you though, I've expanded into, helping a roofing company, which is totally not in my wheelhouse. But what I realized is, again, getting somebody to their full potential. I was able to take, it's a woman that owns it. And I was like, I don't know the space in roofing. I can learn it. And I did. I studied roofing for a while, shadowed them, learned everything. And I put together all of her foundation of her business. And in 6 months, I grew it by 850%,
Mhm.
which a typical roofing is 10%.
Yeah.
So 850 is pretty darn good.
Uh-huh.
And so she's off and running, and I'm kind of done there because she knows what she needs to do. We've hired the right people.
Mhm.
But I realized, you don't have to have an expertise in just medical. Like I focus so heavily from a business consultant on one space because
Mhm.
that's what I knew. But a lot of that can carry over and transition to any space. It really can because it's people, it's relationships, operationally, you can, figure that stuff out. But so I've expanded into different spaces and functional. I just helped a doctor, which was more functional
Mhm.
than the med spa world. And I think in 4 months we grew it by like 400%.
Mhm.
And it's all cash based. So I kind of just expanded the whole business consulting based on my expertise.
Awesome. So I guess, people are listening. So so what she's basically saying is she's open to trying new things based on her experience. Anything
Yeah.
she can help, any business she can help. But, like you said, medical and med spa and fashion, that's kind of her, I guess, the expertise, original expertise. but I mean, roofing is completely different. So obviously she did well there. So yeah, if you're, listening to this and looking for that business expansion, I mean, 850% is crazy. So you might want to talk to her, really. So
I will say I'm impressed by my own self. Like, I don't know, it's a space I think I shocked myself, to be honest, because it's a space I didn't know. But I was so passionate about the mission behind what she wanted to accomplish. And, there was some synergy there. And again, it goes to the heart. There was a bigger picture of what she wanted to grow with it. And I don't know if that completely will be the direction, but I loved who she was and what she was trying to do. And I think because my heart was so into it, even though I knew nothing about roofing, I wasn't passionate about roofing. What I was passionate about is people,
Mhm.
culture, a team, giving people opportunity. That's what drove me.
Mhm.
And it wasn't roofing,
Mhm.
it was all the other fundamentals of the business.
And I have a lot of thoughts in it, but then we could probably go on for another half an hour because that's kind of what I believe into. Once you concentrate on that, everything else is fun, kind of, I guess, yeah, learning the nuances of the business is obviously important too. But I feel like if you have that, everything will do well. I don't know, 850%, but that seems a bit crazy. But at least
I love it. It's my highlight of one of my careers, actually, because I was like, something I totally don't know, but I loved it. That goes back to the people and anybody in business. Like, I think we don't talk enough about it, but culture is key.
it is very key
Yeah.
because I've
Then
done that a long time ago when I led teams in the IT world, then a little bit in the business world. If you, I felt like I was in a startup, involved in a startup. I was so focusing on the culture. But anyway, we didn't. The other founders and me didn't work out. They kicked me out, but that's a totally different story. But yeah, no, I strongly believe that because I saw it improve in companies like Southwest. I worked at Southwest and I saw how critical that was. Although Southwest now is a bit different, but when I consulted there, you could see culture and how people were so happy and why that company was successful. All right. So quick thing before I'll dive into last three questions. We went way longer because I had a lot more questions. I had to cut it down, by the way, because I'm like, this might go for 2 hours. And if
yeah.
I'm talking, asking you questions because there's so many things I had written down that I'm not asking. But one thing I wanted to go back. So what did you discover, like even during your first entrepreneurship? Maybe you discovered more in Landmark, whatever. So what did you discover about yourself that made you shift? Essentially, I mean, you had a horrible childhood, obviously, right? Maybe one thing that helped you was the kid. You're having your daughter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The daughter, maybe that, kind of pushed you to go achieve these things. But this must be something that kind of focused you in being that successful in your first, venture. What do you think? What do you attribute it to? What was
I
that
Yeah,
mind?
so yeah, I don't know if I had one specific. I would say one would definitely have been my daughter, right? Because there was a purpose there. Like, I absolutely wanted her to have more than I had.
Mhm,
And I knew I needed to get out for that to happen, right? So I had a driving force to get out.
mhm,
And how I was going to make that work, I had no idea.
mhm,
But I was very driven, had amazing work ethic since I was 15, right? And so I just knew to work. That was probably my mission, was like, I have to work to provide and put clothes on her, make sure she goes to school. And so I had to do that. It wasn't really an option, if that made sense. Like, I just had to do that to serve. You think of survival. And I think the key to my success, though, was through the survival, taking this opportunity that I had. I think of opportunities in that warehouse where I think, I somehow believed in myself.
mhm,
Why, I don't know. But if you don't believe in yourself, you can't go anywhere. So somehow I believed in myself that yes, I'm boxing packages, but I know I can do more. But
mhm,
I needed an opportunity to prove myself that I could do more. And so that was kind of my thought. That was like the start of my thought process. And so when I got the first opportunity working with the top salesperson, You have to ask for what you want. Things are not given to you. You have to believe that you can do it, right? And then you have to put yourself out there. And again, I talk about mentors. All of my career, again, no college education, but all of my career was because I found the people that I aspire to be
Mhm.
every step of the way. Who's doing it well? How do I learn from them? Whether it was trying to join their team or, follow their lead in whatever direction. Now there's so I think of social media. You can find so much on social media and you can, look to your mentor and research them and chat, has we have so many more tools now, but find the people that do it really well was probably a big part of why it continued on. Because again, you talk about, you don't know what you don't know. Knowledge is the power. Like you got to have the knowledge, and then the experience comes with that, right? That, you can continue on in any direction, if you're open to any possibility. And I think sometimes we get stuck too, if you think of career paths, I went into the apparel world, I went into the aesthetic space, I went back, um, even I went back into the apparel world, but then I did the apparel again twice, do the aesthetics, I start a business, I start a podcast. And so I always tell people all the time, never stop dreaming. We don't just have one avenue. Like, I think people have this loyalty of staying in jobs, and it's like, is that what you're meant to do? I don't know. Like, but you should consider like keep dreaming, like and going after what you want. Like you deserve that. But it does come down to, I would say my key was I always believed in myself and I always had a lot of faith that, what, I went through all of that in my whole childhood and every step of the way that I was proving to myself that I was beating those odds
Mhm.
just reassured me
Mhm.
that I had it in me.
Isn't that amazing that one person can take that to mean positive, and another person can take the negative, which is a whole different thing that even psychologists can't understand, where you saw things that as a positive in the sense that you knew you could overcome and kind of, I mean, you can see in the journey, right? I mean, something, here's what I gathered anyway, let me know if you agree or not, is from the warehouse when you went into the front desk, kind of you proved something to you. Seems like that kind of pivoted for you everything that got you to work with the sales guy, and the sales guy was mentoring, and where you use some keywords where you were always looking for somebody to help you too, seems like,
Yep.
as universe, as the saying says, ask and it shall be given, right? If you don't,
Yeah.
if you seek, then it'll come. Anyway,
It does start with believing in yourself, though. And I think the only way you get there, I say this all the time. And, I think of kids, kids in sports. I use this with my kids all the time. It's like my daughter plays soccer. And it's like, we're all out there, parents, like, come on, get a goal, get a goal. And, the kids running down the field. And until they have a goal, they don't think they can. They don't. So we're cheering them on all day long. And then when they don't have the goal, we're reassuring them next time we got this. So you have to have the win. That's also a big key factor, I would say, is like having those tiny wins. It doesn't need to be huge, but
right.
like the win is the key too. So if you can put yourself out there to start, so you can start having belief and have a win. Once you have one win, then you're starting to believe, wow,
But
that's real. And then another win, you're like, wow, I actually can do this. That for me was also a big part of it was like, again, you talk about the transition. I moved out. That was a win. Wow, I could do it on my own financially. I get a job at a temp service. Wow, I did this on my own. Got an apartment, get a job. Those are all wins that were beating where I came from,
right.
right? So it's like if you can constantly have those wins, and again, it is belief in yourself though, for sure.
It is, and pushing, like taking actions, because I've done so many things myself where I was classified as an introvert and antisocial to making cold calls for more than 1,000 people and actually getting good at it. I'm an IT guy. IT guys don't like people, or
Yeah.
it's what it says, right? Yeah, I mean, once you start taking action, you have a little bit of belief. And sometimes you have to take a lot of actions before you start believing. That's what I got from the cold calling people, where you get yelled at and even cursed out, right? And it's like personal. All right. Last three questions. Well, last three questions. We'll get into last three questions. I had one more, but I feel like I probably need to have another recording with you, maybe. For that, with those questions, we'll leave it aside. Last three questions. What's the one book you would recommend everybody else to read that has helped you a lot? Or what's your favorite book, I guess, maybe?
Oh my God. There's so many. I would say, I think just if I took the fundamental of personal and professional, the Four Agreements is a big book for me.
You mentioned that before, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, it just is because it's not it's about, being impeccable with your word. It's not taking things personal, doing your best. That from a business and a personal, and I think we can't separate the two. What's over here affects over here. What's over here affects over here. So I have a lot of business books that I've read. I mean, I've read so many in different walks of life, but I think, when you can have a whole body experience of like who you are as a person, your character, your integrity, again, it will spill into both of those buckets, the personal and the professional, which is a big deal to me.
Awesome. Well, I think if people listen to you the whole show, probably they already know this answer, but what inspires you to get up and do what you do every day?
Oh, I have a lot. Um, I would say because God wants me to serve and fulfill his purpose.
Hmm. That's I could have gone another episode on that one itself because I have a lot of thoughts in it. That's a great point. People don't understand that even in Bible, what's being said. I've studied Bible and other texts because Bible says similar things to other texts. But anyway, it's very deep. Last question. What is the one tip that has helped you lately that can help others?
One tip that has helped me. Um, I don't know about a tip. I guess I'm thinking about what I've experienced lately has been, we always think the worst of an outcome. And uh, and it never turns out to be as bad as we think, ever.
That's a great point. In fact, today, something I was thinking about actually. Like, I actually posted something to Tony Robbins said similar thoughts is universe is always looking out for us, and we are exactly where we're supposed to be. We just have to be open,
Yeah.
right? And you were sharing about, talking about opportunities that came is because you're talking about people should seek, not just where they are. That's one of the things is people are so stuck. We are. I mean, I'm not saying people, everybody else, even me, so stuck in the path chosen that sometimes we're not open to things that are opening up for us to take a peek, see if that's the path, right? Anyway, we can
And,
again.
well, and on a whole nother note, that which again, most of us create our own roadblocks.
It is. Yes.
Really do. And so, that's part
The
of it.
99.9%.
Yeah.
So I could say almost 100%, but sometimes things can happen physically. I don't know, accident, whatever. They
Our
might.
mind, our mind is powerful.
Very powerful. I've learned that a lot lately. All right, awesome. Well, I mean, I took you too long to record this, but thank you, Teresa, for taking the time. And I'll be sharing all our info, podcast, business, everything with the clips I'm going to share and the recording. So reach out to Teresa if something she shared rhymes with you, either the podcast or the business. I would highly recommend the business for sure, by the way. 800%. Come on, that's crazy. Even it's by luck. Come on, even if you get a quarter, 200%. That's
Yeah,
like freaking awesome. So anyway, all right. Thanks again, Teresa, for taking the time.
you're welcome.